My name is Samantha. I'm 31 years old and a history teacher at a small high school in the suburbs of New York. 3 years ago, I married Lucas, a lawyer from a traditional, wealthy family, known more for its reputation than for genuine affection. They never truly accepted me. Especially my mother-in-law, Margaret, a woman who appeared flawless in public, but was cold to the point of cruelty behind closed doors. That evening, the dinner table was beautifully set to celebrate our wedding anniversary. Under the glow of crystal lights and the sound of clinking glasses, Margaret placed a special salad plate in front of me, one she had prepared herself. "Just for you," she said, her voice sweet as honey, but her eyes colder than steel. I lowered my gaze, about to dig in, but a strange smell made me pause. It was hard to describe, like a chemical scent hidden beneath the tangy sweet dressing. A few seconds later, I quietly swapped plates with my sister-in-law, Chloe, who had never considered me part of the family. 20 minutes later, amid laughter and well wishes, Chloe started coughing violently. Her face turned pale, sweat poured down her forehead, and then she collapsed right in the middle of dinner. The entire family panicked and called for an ambulance. As for me, I just sat there, watching my mother-in-law trying to mask her shock. If it were you, would you have switched plates? If you've ever been looked down on or lived in a family that never truly loved you, leave a comment. Hit like if you've ever felt isolated even while surrounded by people who call themselves family. Subscribe to this channel so we can uncover what happened next. Because what you just heard is only the beginning. I stood by the kitchen door, my hands gently clasped as red and blue lights from the ambulance flickered through the window. Chloe had been taken away, still unconscious. Lucas went with her, rushed and worried, but not for me. I could tell from the way he looked at his mother before he left. A look of complete trust and loyalty. And I stayed. With Margaret. She sat at the head of the dining table, in the seat of the house's true ruler. Her wine glass untouched. Her face disturbingly calm, in stark contrast to the chaos that had just happened. "This is terrifying," she said, her voice trembling, hands intertwined as if trying to calm herself. But I saw it. She wasn't trembling from fear, she was trembling from rage. Because her plan hadn't gone as expected. I didn't answer. I simply stared at the salad plate that should have been mine now cleared away. But that smell still clung to me. That faint sour scent, sharp, with something like diluted antiseptic. I walked slowly into the kitchen, where one of the servers was cleaning up the last few dishes. That salad plate, who prepared it? The young woman paused mid-stack. "Mrs. Margaret. She didn't let anyone else touch it, not even me. She only told me to place it on the table. Did mine look any different?" She hesitated. "Actually, yes. She told me to mark the bottom so she'd know which one was yours." I nodded gently, trying to stay calm. "All right. Thank you." I returned to the dining room. Margaret was already on her feet. She looked at me as if she had just finished an exhausting performance. "I'm heading to my room. Please let me know when there's news about Chloe." "Of course," I replied, forcing a smile. She walked away, her silk robe rustling against the polished wooden floor. I waited until she disappeared up the stairs before returning to the kitchen. "Excuse me," I said to the server. "Do you still have my plate?" She hesitated, then opened a tray beside the sink. "Here." I picked it up and flipped it over. A small symbol had been drawn with a fine-tip marker on the bottom, the letter S, my initial. I knew Margaret was meticulous. But marking a dinner plate? That wasn't habit. That was intention. I left the plate by the sink and stepped out to the back patio, where the darkness had settled over the neatly trimmed garden just like everything else in this house, perfectly maintained. In the dark, I let myself breathe. I had been a daughter-in-law in this family for years, but never had it been more clear that I had never been accepted. They called me an outsider. They said Lucas deserved someone better. I tolerated it, thinking love would be enough to overcome their disdain. But tonight, watching Chloe collapse and seeing Margaret's eyes remain still, I couldn't lie to myself anymore. I went back inside and headed straight to our room. Lucas hadn't returned. Margaret was quiet in hers. I opened my laptop and searched for a private lab nearby. There was one not far from here that specialized in testing food samples and foreign substances. They offered home collection services. I went back to the kitchen, retrieved the marked plate, carefully packed it in a plastic container, placed it in a cooler bag, and put it in the fridge. I would send it out first thing in the morning. As I turned around, Rosa, the oldest housekeeper, was standing right behind me. "Ma'am," she said quietly, "I saw it. I know what Mrs. Margaret did." I flinched slightly. "You do?" Rosa nodded gently. "I've worked here for over 15 years. This isn't the first time someone in this house has gotten sick from food. But no one ever spoke up. They said it was allergies, food poisoning, fatigue. But I always suspected." I stepped closer, my voice low. "Will you help me? I need to know the truth." She glanced around, then nodded. "I'll help. But you need to be careful. She's very good at hiding things." I nodded, a chill creeping into my chest. "Will Chloe be okay?" I asked. "She probably will. But you can't let this blow over like the other times." I didn't respond. I knew I wouldn't. Let this go. Not this time. I went upstairs, closed the door behind me, leaned against the cold wooden panel and tried to steady myself. Chloe may have been the accidental victim, but the real target Margaret had aimed at was me. The question was no longer, did she do it? But why me and why now? That night, I barely slept. The ticking of the clock echoed like a constant reminder. Time was moving, and I needed to act. At dawn, I got up, got dressed, and called the lab. A woman on the line said someone would arrive within 2 hours. I repacked the salad plate, added a few scraps left in the fridge for a complete sample. As I was about to walk out the door, Margaret was already seated at the dining table, reading the newspaper like nothing had happened the night before. "You're up early," she said without looking up. "Yes, I have to step out for a bit. Chloe's awake. Lucas just called. The doctor said there were no clear signs of poisoning. Could've been a reaction to the food, or just exhaustion." I looked at her, keeping my voice calm. "That's good. I hope she recovers soon." Margaret set the paper down and smiled faintly. "Good thing no one ate your plate." I froze. "Excuse me?" She sipped her tea, her eyes gleaming as if she'd just made a harmless comment. "I'm just saying. If that plate had caused something, it's lucky you didn't eat it. Right?" I stared at her for a long moment, then gave a small smile. "Yes, very lucky." I stepped out the door. And I swore no matter what happened next, I would get to the truth. Lucas returned that afternoon, sunlight from early summer cutting through the front windows and casting a long shadow of him across the polished wood floor. I heard the car before it parked, but didn't go out to greet him like I usually did. He walked in, his shoes still dusted from the hospital parking lot, his shirt wrinkled around the shoulders from a night in the usually did chair. His eyes looked tired but not shaken. And one thing was clear, he didn't look at me when he came in. I sat quietly on the living room sofa, waiting like a shadow in the silence of the house. "Is Chloe okay?" Lucas took off his glasses, placed them on the table by the door, and slowly approached. "She's awake. The doctor said they didn't find any signs of actual poisoning. It might have just been a mild physical reaction. Or stress. Stress. Last night, the party, all those people, the pressure. Chloe's been going through a tough time at work too." I nodded slightly. "And the salad? You don't think anything was off?" Lucas looked at me. That gaze, I once trusted it completely, now made me hesitate. "Samantha," he began, voice gentle, "you're reading too much into this. You always do when you feel like my mom doesn't like you. You've said she's controlling, cold. But now you're suggesting she tried to poison you." "I'm not suggesting," I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. "I'm warning. I smelled something strange. I switched plates. And Chloe nearly died. I can't ignore that." Lucas shook his head and looked away. "It's just a feeling." I stood up and moved closer to him. "I sent the plate for testing this morning. I need the truth. You can think I'm paranoid, but I can't stay silent when everything points to one person." He turned back, his eyes darker now, the warmth gone. "You didn't eat the dish my mom made on our anniversary. You switched it with my sisters without telling anyone. You did all of this behind everyone's back. And now you want us to believe that my mom meant to hurt you. You're not listening to what I'm saying. You're only reacting to how your mom and sister feel. Because they're my family, Samantha. That sentence cut deep. I stayed quiet. He hadn't realized I was family too. And what am I? Lucas? I asked, slow and clear. A stranger living here on the grace of your mother's tolerance, or your wife, the woman you promised to protect. Lucas clenched his fists, then turned and walked toward the stairs. I'm tired. I don't want to argue. When the test results come in, we'll talk again. No, I said, staying right where I was. We'll talk right now. He stopped. You told me honesty was everything. So I'm being honest, something wasn't right with that food. I don't want to accuse. I don't want to speculate. But I can't act like nothing happened. Lucas slowly stepped down a few stairs. I know my mom can be strict, but she's not someone who hurts people. You don't know her like I do. I know she's a wall. She only lets in the people she chooses. And I've never been one of them. Lucas sighed, walked into his office, and closed the door. The sound wasn't loud, but it echoed inside me. I stood, alone in the hallway, the soft light from the windows unable to chase away the cold rising in my chest. I wasn't surprised. Lucas took his mother's side. Since we married, he always had. But I didn't just need him to understand, I needed him to see the truth. The truth was, I had walked into a family designed to make me feel small. Every polite gesture came with a subtle insult. Every look from Margaret held challenge, as if I were an inconvenience she barely tolerated. I once believed that if I tried hard enough, for long enough, things would change. But last night, when I saw Chloe collapse and Margaret's calm eyes, as if it were all going according to plan, I stopped believing in coincidences. Lucas had always been steady. But that steadiness had become blindness. I returned to the kitchen, sat at the table, and opened my notebook. I needed to write it all down, to make sure no detail of this story could be twisted. I noted the smell. The sensation when I brought the plate close. The way Margaret placed it in front of me. How her gaze lingered just a little longer. Her voice just a little too sweet. I wrote down Chloe's reaction, her short breaths, the choking coughs, and the way Margaret stood up, not too fast, not too slow, as if she had expected it all. I wrote, not to accuse, but to remember. Because if I was the only one who saw the signs, I had to be the first one to act. Night fell. I went upstairs. Lucas's door stayed closed. We said nothing more. But I knew between that silence, something was growing. Not because I doubted my mother-in-law, but because I had dared to say it out loud. I lay in bed, staring up at the ceiling. My chest felt hollow, like the meaningless white wall above me. I no longer saw this house as a place of shelter. I was no longer sure I was loved. All I had left was the truth. And loneliness. And I had to find out whether those two things were enough to carry me through to the end. I came downstairs as the clock struck 10 a.m. Lucas had left early. Margaret, as always, was sitting in the backyard, porcelain cup in hand, her posture upright like a statue. I moved quietly down the hall, avoiding her gaze, heading straight for the kitchen. Rosa was standing at the sink, rinsing a few porcelain plates still stained with a bit of sauce from breakfast. I lowered my voice as I approached. Rosa, I called. She stopped, turned around. In her aging brown eyes was a look that made me feel safe, steady, thoughtful, and understanding. You want to talk now? She whispered. I nodded. We didn't exchange another word. Just a brief glance. Then we stepped out behind the garden shed, where the yard tools were stored and where few people came during the day. Rosa shut the door behind us, the old metal latch clicking softly. Inside, light filtered down from the small window above, casting dust into the air. It was stuffy, but I didn't care. I needed the truth. I know. You suspect her, Rosa said, voice calm and low. And you're not wrong. I stared at her, unblinking. You've seen something before. I've lived here for 16 years. I've seen more than I should, Rosa replied, looking straight into my eyes. People come and go. Staff replaced without explanation. The girl who was engaged to Lucas before Rachel, she collapsed during dinner one night. The doctor said low blood pressure. But I cleared the table that evening. And I saw hers was the only plate Margaret brought out herself. My throat tightened. What happened to Rachel? I asked. Rosa shook her head. No one knows. Her family moved away quietly. Lucas never mentioned her again. Margaret never leaves traces. I had to brace myself against the wooden table behind me. So you think, you're not the first, Rosa said slowly. But you might be the first clear-headed enough to notice. And brave enough to speak. I closed my eyes. Briefly, then took a deep breath. Rosa, I need your help. I saved part of the salad from the plate I was supposed to eat that night. I need to know exactly what's in it. She nodded without hesitation. Do you still have it? I kept it in an airtight container in the freezer. Good, Rosa said, pulling a small glass vial from her apron pocket, filled with a clear liquid. This is from my daughter's quick test kit. She works at a lab in the city. I can collect a sample and send it in for you. But you must stay completely silent. Margaret watches everything. I nodded. She marked the bottom of my plate. That level of care is never random, Rosa cut in, her eyes darkening. She chooses targets. Then she plans. One time, a new maid accidentally spilled water on her silk tablecloth. She was let go that very night. We left the shed quietly. Rosa took the food sample I'd wrapped and tucked it deep into a worn tote. That evening, I skipped dinner with the family. I said I was tired and went to my room early. Lucas sent me a short text. We'll talk tomorrow. I didn't reply. I wasn't sure there was anything left to say if he still held on to that blind trust. 3 days later, Rosa called me into the kitchen. Her face was unusually tense. The results are in, she said, handing me a sealed envelope. I opened it. My eyes landed on a bolded line. Detection of mild neurodisruptive compound, non-lethal. But causes symptoms including disorientation, panic, increased heart rate, and temporary nervous system dysfunction. I gripped the paper. My hands trembled. It's real, I whispered. It wasn't just a feeling. It wasn't in my head. Rosa took my hand, her gaze softening. I believed you from the start. But now you have what no one can deny proof. I nodded, but there was no relief in me. Only growing fear. If Margaret was calm enough to do that, what else was she capable of? And, if I exposed this, who would be the next to eat something special? Rosa looked at me, her voice low. You have to be smart now. One wrong move, and you'll be the one pushed out just like all the others. I nodded, folded the report, and hid it inside a thick book on my nightstand. That night, I lay quietly beside Lucas. He had his back to me, breathing steadily, unaware of the truth I was now hiding behind his shoulder. I closed my eyes, my heart like a frozen lake over burning lava. I had no choice left. I had to move forward. But not with emotion. I would move with logic. And each step had to be precise. I scheduled an appointment with Dr. Amelia Green for a late afternoon midweek, when the city softened between work and quiet, and early summer breezes swept through the maple trees outside her small midtown clinic. Only one amber light remained lit at the reception desk, and the closed sign had been flipped from inside. I knocked gently twice. Seconds later, Dr. Amelia appeared tall, lean, her silver hair pulled back neatly, face serious but not cold. Miss Samantha? She asked. Yes. Thank you for agreeing to meet me after hours. I heard your voice on the phone and I couldn't ignore my instinct. I followed her inside, where the room felt more like a sanctuary than a medical office. No antiseptic smell. Only pine wood and old books. On the desk was a printed copy of the lab results I had sent in advance. Do you know what this compound is usually used for? She asked as I sat down. I only know it's not lethal. I replied, but enough to make someone lose control. She nodded slightly. It was used in clinical trials back in the previous decade. Disrupts the sympathetic nervous system, elevated heart rate, disorientation, sometimes panic. Not permanently toxic, but enough to make someone believe they're losing their mind. I looked at her. Doctor, have you seen a case like this before? She was quiet for a moment, then pulled out an old, yellowed file from under the desk. Have you ever heard the name Evelyn Marks? I nodded. She was engaged to Lucas, my husband, a few years ago. But her family moved away suddenly. No one ever spoke of it again. Evelyn was once my patient, Dr. Amelia said slowly. She came to me with symptoms of insomnia, anxiety, hand tremors, and numbness in her legs. Her primary doctor chalked it up to pre-wedding stress. But I didn't believe it. I froze. What happened next? A week before the wedding, Evelyn came to see me one last time. She said she was afraid of someone in her fiancé's family. Didn't name them. Only said this person always stared at her when she wasn't looking. A chill ran down my spine. She said certain meals made her feel dizzy, made her heart race in a strange way. But no one believed her. And then, the wedding was called off. Lucas never told me why. I whispered. Evelyn suddenly vanished from records, moved away with her mother, left no address. But a few weeks later, she sent me a handwritten letter. Doctor. Amelia opened a drawer, took out an old envelope, and pushed it toward me. I opened it. Under the lamplight, shaky handwriting emerged. I can't be sure what I'm feeling is real, but I'm terrified of myself. Every time I start to question things, she smiles. So gently. But it feels like I'm being strangled. I hope someone else sees what I see. I gently set the letter down, my hand still trembling. Evelyn was talking about Margaret. Doctor. Amelia leaned back, her eyes fixed on mine. Samantha, I've been a doctor for nearly 30 years. There are some fears people can't name, because when they do, everyone calls them delusions. But intuition isn't always wrong. I nodded, my throat tight. Margaret, I whispered, has been interfering in Lucas's life long before I came into it. I don't think she just wants to protect her son. Amelia said softly. I think she wants control. I closed my eyes as the puzzle pieces began falling into place. Margaret's chilling composure. The piercing glances at dinner. The way she made everyone believe in her absolute authority. And Lucas, the man who always saw his mother as the ideal, who never questioned her. I opened my eyes. If I keep investigating, keep digging, will you help me? Dr. Amelia stared at me for a long moment. Then she nodded. I can't get directly involved, but I can send you official files documented cases similar to yours. If you plan to face Margaret, you'll need something undeniable. I left the clinic at dusk. The streetlights cast a warm orange glow on the quiet street. I kept walking, Evelyn's words echoing in my mind. I knew she had once tried to speak up, and she had been forced into silence. I couldn't let history repeat itself. Margaret wasn't just my mother-in-law. She was the architect of a family built on fear. And I had walked straight into the center of that web. But I wasn't alone. I had the truth. I had the names of those who had been hurt. And if I didn't stop, I would be the first to walk out without being crushed. I found Rachel's old address in a university archive Lucas once attended. I had been sitting alone in the city library, surrounded by dusty filing cabinets rarely touched. I borrowed the identity of a researcher studying broken engagements due to psychological causes, and no one questioned me. Under the dim yellow reading lamp, the line appeared clearly: Rachel N. Whitmore, born 1991, previously resided at 17 Maple Drive, suburban Beacon, New York. I hit the road the next morning. The snow had long melted, but the air was still cool, carrying the scent of damp earth after a night's rain. As the car turned into that narrow street, I immediately sensed an eerie stillness. The trees lining the road stood tall but bare, as if spring was still hesitating to return. The house at number 17 sat back from the road, with a gray brick facade and faded black shingles. The upstairs windows had the curtains drawn shut. I stepped up and knocked twice. No answer. I was about to leave when the door cracked open. A middle-aged woman with silver-streaked hair appeared. "Excuse me, are you Mrs. Whitmore?" She didn't answer right away. Just studied me carefully, as if trying to read something behind the polite smile I struggled to maintain. "Who are you?" "My name is Samantha. I'm Lucas's wife, the man Rachel was once engaged to." Her eyes widened for a moment, then narrowed, like a reflexive defense. "I didn't come to cause trouble," I said quickly. I just need to know what really happened to Rachel. I think I might be in a similar situation. A pause. Then she stepped back and opened the door wider. Come in. Inside the house was another world, quiet, somewhat somber, as if the past still lingered in every corner. The scent of lavender oil mixed with black tea hung in the air. I'm Rachel's mother. My name is Marlene, she said, her voice low but firm. I never thought anyone would bring that up again. I'm sorry to reopen old wounds. But I need to understand. Margaret. Marlene gave a small bitter laugh. I knew it. She poured me a cup of tea, then sat across from me, her hands resting on her knees as if to steady herself. Rachel used to be so vibrant. Independent, strong. She and Lucas met during senior year of college. Everything was perfect at first. But then, I started seeing her change. How? She couldn't sleep. Started panicking for no reason. Said someone was watching her. Once she told me Lucas's mother stood across the street for hours, just staring into her window. I tightened my grip on the teacup. She had a brief memory blackout after a party at their house, Marlene continued. Only a few hours, but it terrified her. After that, Rachel said Margaret constantly tried to make her feel unstable. Subtle threats disguised as polite remarks. I inhaled deeply. And what made your family leave? Marlene lifted her gaze, eyes deep and conflicted, as if caught between restraint and release. One night, Rachel disappeared for several hours. When we found her, she was curled up in the bathroom, didn't recognize anyone. Her hands were clutching her head, and she kept whispering the same thing. She won't let me go. My chest tightened. We didn't call the police, she continued. My husband was afraid it would hurt the family's reputation. And me. I just wanted my daughter safe. We moved the very next day. Left no number. Cut all ties. And Rachel? How is she now? She lives in Vermont now. Alone. Never married, never stayed with anyone long. She keeps to herself still, in therapy. And none of us dare say the name Margaret. I sat in silence, mind racing. I've been through something similar, I whispered. I haven't lost my memory, but it feels like I'm being suffocated a little more every day. And everyone around me keeps saying I'm imagining things. Marlene placed her hand over mine, her gaze softening. They make you doubt yourself. That's how they keep control. I nodded, eyes stinging. I don't want this to happen again, I said firmly. I want to expose her. But I need evidence. Anything Rachel ever wrote down. A recording, a journal, anything. Marlene was quiet for a few seconds. Then she stood and walked toward the stairs. I waited, still clutching the now cold teacup. She returned a few moments later, carrying an old leather notebook. Rachel left this. She once said, if anyone needs to understand, give them this. I've kept it for 9 years, but no one's ever asked. Until today. I took the notebook and opened it. Rachel's handwriting appeared under the soft light, shaky and filled with fear. I saw her outside the window. She knew I saw her but didn't walk away. She smiled. I felt frozen. One time I noticed a small white vial in the kitchen, but when I turned back, it was gone. Page after page, distorted memories, moments where Rachel felt herself slipping from reality. I closed the notebook and held it tightly. I didn't know what I'd be facing, but I knew one thing. I no longer doubted. Margaret wasn't just a controlling mother-in-law. She was a manipulator. Cold, precise, and deeply dangerous. I returned from Beacon just as dusk settled. The city was still alive, but inside me was a quiet void. Rachel's notebook sat heavy in my bag, as heavy as the truth inside it. Everything I'd read left no doubt in my mind. I pulled into the driveway, the porch light already on. I hadn't even reached the door when it opened. It was Chloe. She stood there, arms crossed, still looking pale but sharper, more alert. I want to talk, she said. I nodded. Me too. We went into the living room. I hadn't even sat down before Chloe spoke. Mom said you switched the plate. I looked at her for a long moment, then exhaled slowly. I did. But not to hurt you. I did it to protect myself. She said you were always jealous because she never truly loved you. That you thought making me the target would prove her favoritism. Her voice trembled not from anger but from conflict. Chloe, I said gently, have you ever wondered why I got the special salad? Why there was only one marked plate? Why you, someone with no allergy history, collapsed during dinner? She said nothing. I stepped a little closer. Did you feel anything strange right before it happened? A racing heart? Numbness in your hands? Like something wasn't right in your body? She stared at me, then gave a faint nod. Yes. Like all my energy drained. My throat was dry and my head spun. That wasn't stress. That wasn't random. And you're not the first. I sat down, opened my bag, and placed Rachel's notebook between us on the table. This belonged to Lucas's former fiancé. She was exactly where I am now, accused of being too sensitive, unreasonably suspicious. In the end, she nearly lost her mind. And the only person at the center of it all was your mother. Chloe didn't touch the notebook, but her eyes were locked onto it. Why would Mom do that? Because she doesn't want to lose control. Anyone who enters this family and doesn't fit the picture she's painted gets removed. You're her daughter, so you haven't seen it fully. But I have. She doesn't love people. She just keeps them where she wants them. Chloe still said nothing, but her eyes softened. She stood, picked up the notebook. I need time. I understand, I said. But don't let your mother be the only one who tells the story. That night, Lucas came home late. He didn't look at me right away, just hung up his coat and stood by the window in silence. I waited in the living room, knowing what was coming. Finally, he turned. I spoke to Chloe. So did I? I replied calmly. You shouldn't have switched the plate without telling anyone. You put someone else at risk, even if your intentions were good. I stood and faced him. If I hadn't, I'd be in the hospital. Or worse. Lucas frowned. You think my mother poisoned you? Not think. I have proof. I placed the lab report on the table. The sample from that salad plate. It showed a compound that disrupts the nervous system. He looked at the paper. His eyes flickered. But a few seconds later, he folded it. It could be a handling error. That doesn't prove anything. I wasn't surprised. You want me to leave, he said softer. Now. Just for a few days. Until Mom calms down. Chloe's still fragile too. I gave a small laugh, but it wasn't from joy. Who are you protecting, Lucas? He said nothing. I walked upstairs and packed only what I needed. By the time I left, night had fully fallen. The wind had picked up, carrying its familiar chill. I didn't leave in anger or sadness. I left because I had to, but not to surrender. I needed distance to plan clearly. Margaret wanted me to vanish quietly, but she wouldn't get that. I was coming back from the shadows with the light of truth. And with those she'd quietly cast aside. I was no longer alone. And Margaret would soon know that. I hired a private investigator just 3 days after leaving Margaret's house. An old college friend, Julia Klein, is now a legal advisor for a private security firm in Brooklyn. I didn't have to explain much. I said just one sentence. I need someone good at finding things people try to hide. And she introduced me to a man named Adam Reeve. We met at a small cafe in Williamsburg, where soft jazz blended with the smell of espresso and cinnamon pastries. Adam arrived right on time. Tall and lean, dressed simply, but with eyes like steel. The kind of person who never says more than needed, never fakes a smile, and never misses a detail. I need to look into someone's financial history. I began, placing an envelope with some basic information about Margaret in front of him. He skimmed the file, pausing when he saw the name. Margaret Whitford. Mother-in-law? I nodded. I suspect she's connected to a string of events, disappearances, strange behavior, and most recently, a poisoning. He didn't ask for more. Just nodded, pulling an old ballpoint pen from his shirt pocket. I'll start with bank accounts, international transfers, any shady financial links. It might take a few days. But if she's hiding something, I'll find it. 4 days. Later, Adam called me. His voice was low, slow, and full of meaning. We need to meet. Now. We met again at the same cafe, in a more secluded corner. Adam carried a small black case which he set down on the table before pulling out a file thicker than I had expected. I checked all of Margaret's U.S. bank accounts completely clean. Too clean. No unusual transfers, no odd spending patterns. But after tracking a private company she invested in 17 years ago, I found a trail that led to an account in Switzerland. I leaned forward. The account is tied to an anonymous trust fund. But regular payments go out every quarter to the same person, a man named James Caldwell. I felt the blood drain from my body. Who is James Caldwell? I asked, though deep down I already knew. Adam opened his laptop and turned the screen toward me. A file appeared, a photo of a man in his 60s, with salt and pepper hair and a face as cold as stone. Psychiatrist. Used to work at a private consulting center in Connecticut. But what's notable is he didn't have many public patients. Most of his work involved secretive cases, none processed through insurance. Why Caldwell? I muttered. Because, Adam said, flipping to another sheet, in the list of people once treated by him, I found two familiar names. He paused. I read. And my heart skipped a beat. Rachel N. Whitmore. And Maria Hensley. Who's Maria? I asked, my voice dry. The housekeeper who used to work for Margaret's family. She disappeared 7 years ago. No warning. Left no contact information. All her records were wiped from the staffing agency's internal system. But there's one hospital bill signed by Caldwell just a week before she vanished. I closed my eyes. All the pieces began to fit. This wasn't just suspicion anymore. This was a system, a quiet, calculated network with Margaret pulling the strings. I also found out, Adam continued, that Caldwell doesn't only receive money from Margaret. Some of it is funneled through the Whitford family's charitable foundation, the same one she uses to legitimize her cash flow. I touched the edge of the file. Adam, if I wanted to make this public, would this be strong enough? With just the bank records and patient list, not yet. But if you have a statement, a witness, even just an audio recording, this could be a bombshell. I was silent for a few seconds. I have Rachel's journal, and I think I can find Maria. Adam nodded. If anyone's still alive who's been through what you have, that person is your only real shot at ending all of this. I thanked him, holding the file like a part of the truth I'd been waiting for all this time. That evening, I sat in a temporary apartment. No one knew I was there. Outside the window, the city murmured like a never-ending play. I turned on the desk lamp and reopened each document Adam had given me. Every line of numbers, every name, was telling a story I had no choice but to hear through to the end. I called Rosa. Miss Samantha? Her voice came through, full of concern. I need to know something, I said, gripping the phone. Maria, the housekeeper who disappeared 7 years ago, do you know where she lives? There was a pause. Yes. Rosa finally said softly. I kept in touch, quietly. She lives in Maine, near the Canadian border. But she's afraid. She doesn't want to come back. I'm not asking her to do anything. I just want to hear her story. And if she agrees, we might be able to help so many people. I heard a sigh, soft as wind through the receiver. I'll call her, Rosa said. But you must promise no pressure. Maria has spent years trying to stand again. I nodded, though she couldn't see me. Only if she's willing. I'll wait. And I knew, this battle had entered a completely different phase. No longer about emotions. No longer about intuition. This was reality. And I was holding a piece of the truth Margaret had buried for nearly 2 decades. I chose a small hotel on the edge of Brooklyn, not too fancy, but private and discreet. The meeting room I rented was on the 3rd floor, with large windows overlooking the street and soft yellow light glowing over a small round table in the center. I arrived early, checked every document, set up a backup recorder, connected the mini projector to my laptop. Everything had to be clear. No emotion overpowering logic. This wasn't a family discussion. This was a presentation of truth and of a woman I once thought was a mother-in-law. Rosa was the first to arrive. She wore an old ash-gray knit coat, her face more tense than I'd seen before. As she entered the room, she glanced around quickly, then sat in the chair beside me, her hands tightly clasped together. Did I do the right thing? she asked quietly, voice trembling. You were braver than anyone, I replied gently, placing a hand over hers in reassurance. 15 minutes later, Chloe walked in. She wore a cream-colored hoodie and jeans, her hair tied up in a slightly messy bun, eyes weary like she hadn't slept in days. When she saw Rosa, she hesitated, then nodded and took the seat across from me. Is anyone else coming? She asked, voice dry. I invited one more person, I said. An independent lawyer. No ties to either side of the family. The goal isn't to make a scene, but to help us all understand what we're dealing with and what we should do next if we want this to end legally. The door opened again. A middle-aged woman stepped in, short brown hair, glasses, a neat file folder in her hands. Her name was Linda Grayson, a civil and mental health attorney who had worked with organizations that protect elderly individuals and women suffering from psychological abuse. I invited everyone to sit around the table and turned on the projector. We'll begin now, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. I know what you're about to hear won't be easy. But I ask that you listen through to the end. I projected onto the screen the Swiss bank statements where regular payments from an anonymous trust fund were being funneled into an account under the name James Caldwell. A psychiatrist who used to work at a confidential treatment center, I explained, moving to the next slide a portrait of Caldwell alongside his patient records. On his list of clients were Rachel and Whitmore Lucas's former fiancée and Maria Hensley, a former housekeeper in Margaret's home. Both women either disappeared or left after having prolonged contact with Caldwell, and with Margaret. Chloe leaned forward. Are you saying my mom was behind all of it? He won't believe it, Chloe whispered. Lucas will say you made this all up. I don't need Lucas to believe me. I need you to look at this. I opened the audio recording of Rosa's testimony. The recording played in the room, so quiet you could hear the ticking of the wall clock. I remember, she told me, when I asked why she hated Samantha so much. She laughed and said, I'll drive her mad just like the last one. You think Rachel could handle me? No one lasts around me for long. I saw Chloe's hands start to tremble. Her eyes widened, panic flooding in like she was watching a distorted version of her childhood unravel before her. Linda, the attorney, finally spoke. What Samantha's gathered carries considerable legal weight. But if we want to take this to court or even initiate an official investigation, we'll need cooperation from someone inside the family. Chloe, this depends on you. Chloe looked at me. Gone was the angry, resentful glare I saw the last time at Margaret's house. In its place was chaos torn between memories, love, and crushing disillusionment. Why would she do this? Chloe stammered. To outsiders, sure. But to her own family? Rosa answered, gently but with pain in her voice, because she can't accept anyone disrupting her plans. No one is allowed to pull Lucas out of her reach. No one is allowed to be loved without her approval. I slid the folder toward Chloe. Every piece of evidence here is traceable and verifiable. If you sign this statement, you'll be the first family member to stand up. And if you don't, Linda added, everything can still move forward, but it will take longer and be far riskier. Because if Margaret finds out we're investigating, she'll erase every trace. Just like she has before. Chloe didn't answer right away. She picked up the file, flipped through each page, her lips pressed tightly. I didn't rush her. Didn't look at her. I just waited. 5 minutes later, Chloe looked up. Her face no longer that of a broken daughter, but of a young woman trying to rise from a spar, life tightly controlled. I'll sign, she said, her voice steadier than I expected. I handed her the pen, and she signed. Each slanted letter of her name shook slightly, but there was no hesitation. Linda collected the documents and nodded to me. We're ready to proceed. I looked at Rosa, she gave a small nod, eyes shimmering. She had never expected to one day confront her old employer. But tonight she wasn't alone. And I, the one who'd been thrown out of that very house, was now orchestrating a quiet meeting that might just topple an untouchable family empire. We chose Saturday night, the same night the entire family would attend the annual fundraising gala at the Rotary Club in Westchester. Margaret had picked out her gown a week in advance, a pearl-trimmed ivory evening dress. She lived for these events, where she could wrap herself in the title of model mother, and bask in the praise of high society. Chloe offered to stay home feeling unwell, and no one suspected a thing. Ever since the soup incident, Margaret had been gentler with her daughter, perhaps out of fear of that new, no longer obedient look in Chloe's eyes. As Lucas's SUV rolled off the driveway, I was already hiding in the storage room, cloaked in darkness among old cardboard boxes. Chloe signaled through the kitchen window, then unlocked the back door, her hand gripping the knob tightly as if she were still shaking off nerves. "The study's on the second floor, last door down the hall," she whispered. "I'll monitor the doorbell cam. If anyone comes home early, I'll call right away." I nodded, crept up the stairs, heart pounding like a war drum in my chest. Margaret's study was forbidden territory. A sealed space with brown carpet floors and bookshelves lining 2 full walls. On the wooden desk sat a reading lamp and a vintage rotary phone. I didn't have to search long, the safe was hidden behind a portrait of Margaret herself. A classic hiding place, arrogant in its predictability. There was no key. But Chloe had secretly recorded a video of her mother opening the safe, enough for me to guess the code. 0918, Lucas's birthday. I entered the code. The safe opened without a sound. Inside was a thick bundle of documents tied with velvet string, a dark leather notebook, and a USB drive in a silver casing. I took all 3 out, laid them on the desk, and switched on the lamp. The leather notebook made my skin crawl the moment I turned the first page. Familiar handwriting slanted, deliberate. It was Margaret's. Notes on necessary adjustments to maintain family order. I read through the entries, each one stabbing like a needle to the skin. March, Rachel refuses the engagement, signs of resistance. Contact Caldwell. Condition improved after 2nd week of private treatment. June, Maria overheard a conversation in the kitchen, fell down the stairs. August, Samantha showing signs of independent reasoning. Reduce frequency of contact. Use Chloe as emotional intermediary. I couldn't read aloud. I just kept turning page after page, my throat dry like dust. In the folder were transfer records, dozens of small payments to accounts under the name J.C., with notes. 3rd week dosage, maintain 10 milligrams. We had the evidence. No more suspicion. These were handwritten confessions, but to Margaret, they weren't crimes. They were strategy. A blueprint for control. "Sis," I jumped. Chloe stood at the door, face pale, hands trembling. "Lucas just came back. I don't know why he's early." Footsteps echoed in the hallway. I didn't have time to hide anything. I simply stood between the desk and the door, the lamp still shining down on the notebook of crimes. Lucas opened the door. His eyes swept across me, then stopped at the open safe. And in that brief moment, I saw every layer of trust in his face crumble. "Samantha, what the hell are you doing?" His voice was cold, dry. I didn't get a chance to answer. Chloe stepped forward, placing herself between us. I asked her to, her voice rang out shaky but clear. "I need to know. I need to see everything Mom's been hiding." Lucas turned to her, eyes wide. "Chloe, you too." I nearly died, Lucas. I used to believe it was Samantha's fault. But after what I've seen, what I've heard, I can't pretend anymore. I gently placed the notebook down and pushed it toward Lucas. "Read it," I said, my voice low. "And if you still dare to say I'm just imagining things, then maybe you're the one who's never truly looked." Lucas stepped forward, hands shaking as he flipped through the first pages. His eyes scanned each line, growing darker with every word. When he reached the part that mentioned Rachel, his hand dropped to his side. "You always wondered why she left without saying a word," I said slowly. "Why no one kept in touch. Now you know." Lucas didn't say anything. 1 minute passed, then 2, heavy with silence. Finally, he sank into the chair like the years he'd spent standing on a foundation of lies had finally given way beneath him. "I knew my mom could be rigid," he muttered. "But this? It's not rigidity," Chloe whispered. "It's control. Manipulation. A crime." I looked at Lucas. "I never wanted to break your family apart. I just couldn't live in a house where the truth was buried, and people were treated like chess pieces." Lucas covered his face with both hands. For the first time, he didn't defend Margaret. He didn't blame me. I turned to Chloe. She nodded. We both knew this night was a turning point. And the truth, no matter how painful, was finally in the light. The first news to appear on local platforms was just a short headline. Prominent Westchester woman under investigation for alleged guardianship abuse and psychological manipulation within family. No one named Margaret at first, but only a few hours later, after journalists followed insider tips. Footage of her stepping out of her white two-story house in that familiar pearl-trimmed silk dress she wore to church was everywhere on the morning news. I watched the screen with no sense of triumph, no heartbreak either. Just a deep silence inside my chest, like all the unease I had carried for years had finally been validated by evidence, by the cold gaze of the law. Lucas didn't text me right away. It wasn't until the third day after Margaret was taken into custody for questioning that he sent a short message. I know I was wrong. Can we meet? I said yes. We met at a small cafe where we used to go in the early days. But his hands were shaking now, his eyes sunken, no longer the confident man who once sat tall with an espresso in hand. I always thought my mom was just overprotective because she loved us, Lucas said, voice hoarse. I never imagined. I placed my hand on the table, not touching his. Lucas, I once wanted you to see what I saw. But maybe you were never ready. Not just because of her, but because the truth would shake everything you believed in. He lowered his head. How angry are you with me? I went quiet for a moment, then gently replied. I'm not angry. I'm just sad. Because there were times I needed you. And you weren't there. Lucas said nothing more. He understood. And I felt something close to closure. Not quite forgiveness, but release. So we could both be free from the weight of what was left unsaid. Chloe was different. She took initiative. She called me one afternoon, her voice lighter than the day she screamed at me under Margaret's control. I spoke to my therapist, she began. I want long-term treatment. I want to leave the house, leave the city. I need to learn how to think for myself, feel for myself, not just repeat what Mom has said my whole life. I didn't hide my emotions. Chloe was still young, still had time to peel away every thread of the invisible rope her mother had wrapped around her mind. And she had chosen to do so. Bravely. As for me, I never returned to that house. Not once. I moved into a small apartment in Brooklyn, where I could hear the streetcars early in the morning and see the sun stretch across old brick walls in the evening. I started writing. Not a memoir. Not a legal report. A story. A voice. I titled the piece, Family and the Controllers in the Dark. I wrote about Margaret, though I never named her. I wrote about a certain kind of woman society loves to praise, graceful, educated, always present at charity events, always impeccably put together. But beneath that image was power cloaked in sacrifice, control disguised as love, manipulation woven into every meal, every glance, every "I only want what's best for you." I wrote about how people like me, like Chloe, had suffocated inside the golden cage of a model family. I wrote for anyone who had ever been told to stay silent to protect the family name, to forgive because it's blood, because a mother is always right. I wrote it all without softening, without excuses. And when it was published, I thought it would just be a small echo among the noise of countless stories each day. But within 3 days, my inbox was flooded. Strangers wrote. I thought I was the only one who felt that way. Older women wrote. My daughter forgave me because I shared your story. Some sent photos of corners in their homes where they hung up the article, reminders that love should never be based on control. I never expected to receive a handwritten letter. But one misty morning, in the mailbox outside my building, I found an envelope with no return name. Inside, a single sheet of paper with just a few handwritten lines. Thank you for speaking up. I'm Rachel. I sat down on the floor, my clothes soaked from the rainwater that had leaked into the mailbox. I thought of the haunted eyes in that old photo I had found while researching Lucas's ex-fiancée. I thought of Margaret's cold entry, Rachel resisted. Handled. Rachel was still alive. And she had read my words. She knew someone had finally said out loud what she once tried to scream in silence. I folded the letter and placed it in the drawer next to my writing desk. Not as a keepsake, but as a promise. That truth, once brought into the light, will never again be buried by the darkness of those who claim to love. If you've ever experienced being controlled in the name of love, If you've ever been silent in a family where silence is expected as duty, then maybe this story isn't just mine anymore. I'm not sharing it for pity. I'm sharing it to remind you that sometimes, the cruelest acts come wrapped in the sweetest words. And that speaking up isn't betrayal, it's protection. For yourself. And maybe, for someone else who hasn't yet found the strength to open their eyes. What about you? In your family, has anyone ever been forced to stay quiet just to keep things looking normal? Have you ever seen someone be controlled and struggled to even name what it was? I'd truly love to hear your thoughts in the comments. Please feel free to share because what you say might be exactly what someone else out there needs to feel a little less alone. And if this story meant something to you, don't forget to follow the channel for more raw, honest stories from real life, stories where not every family is a haven, but where there's always hope for healing and for a new beginning. Thank you for listening.